Well, welcome to InnoPower 2020, beyond 2020. In fact, this is the politics panel, and we have some very knowledgeable and exciting panelists on today to discuss this very important topic. But before we begin, I just want to give a shout out to our sponsors for today, the Indy Chamber, Goldman Sachs via their 10,000 Business Initiative, Second Muse, the Mind Trust, Kepler Institute, J2 Medical Supply, and New America. So obviously our sponsors make all of this possible. The conference is free to the viewers, and so we are very thankful to our sponsors. So let us begin by introducing our panelists for today. We will begin with Cecilia Coble. Cecilia has served on the Fishers City Council since 2015. In January of this year, she made history after being unanimously elected to be the first woman to serve as the Fishers City Council president. So congratulations on breaking that barrier. She currently serves on the nonprofit and finance committees. She is a special needs parent and is a strong advocate for the disability community as the co-chair of the Fishers Advisory Committee on Disability. The City of Fishers was the recipient of the 2017 Champions of Inclusion Award as a result of the committee's efforts to bring more awareness, education, and celebration of those with intellectual and developmental disabilities in Fishers. Cecilia also serves as the vice chairperson of the Fishers Arts and Culture Commission. So welcome, Cecilia. And we will just start with you. I'll read everyone's brief bio before asking them the question. So the first question for you is, what led you to decide to pursue a career in politics?
Well, I come from an interesting background. My mother immigrated here from Mexico after she graduated from high school with her family. Met my father in college. Both of them come from very humble beginnings, and they have a strong appreciation for this country and the opportunities that are available for people here. And through family discussions at the dinner table, we would sit around the table and try to solve the world's problems and have, debate and discussion. So growing up, I was involved in student leadership groups, and when Fishers was getting ready to become a city, there was an opportunity, there were seats available. It was the first time that there was going to be a municipal election for mayor and city council. And I thought, now's the time. And I had been involved in various nonprofit groups. And one of the things that I felt really strongly was that I wanted to do was, I felt we needed people from all walks of life serving in those elected capacities. So I'm at large, so I serve all of Fishers on the city council, but I wanted to also represent the disability community in Fishers. I have a daughter with autism and cognitive delays, and there's a lot of frustration sometimes when you feel like you're not being heard, things aren't happening as fast as you'd like. So I was like, I need to get out in front of this. I need to educate elected leaders, community leaders about some of the challenges facing those with disabilities. And I felt like I could really make a difference, not only for the disability community, but just for the whole community in general. So
I appreciate that, and as someone who has members of my family who are close to me, very close to me, who have mental and developmental disabilities, I can certainly appreciate that. Next, we will go to Rima Shahid. Rima has served as the first executive director of Women for Change, beginning to do so in 2017. Before Women for Change, Rima served as the executive director of the Muslim Alliance of Indiana and spent more than a decade as the trade development officer and cultural attaché at the Pakistan Embassy in Bahrain. With a passion for advocacy and a collaborative philosophy, Rima brings a unique perspective to community outreach objectives. She lives in central Indiana with her husband, Munib, and their 3 children. Rima, thank you for joining us on today, and would ask you the same question. What made you become interested in politics?
Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for having me, and I apologize for my technical difficulties this morning.
Not at all.
As much as we rely on technology, sometimes it lets us down. So I think what really led me to join is being in Bahrain during the Arab Spring and seeing what happens when you don't have a government for the people, by the people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what really sprung me into action and has led me to where I am today.
Well, thank you. Really appreciate that, and good to have you. Next, we have Representative Robin Shackleford. Robin is an Indianapolis native. She's dedicated her life to the principles of servant leadership. She was first elected to the Indiana House in 2012 and represents District 98. She serves as the ranking minority member of the Public Health Committee. She also is on the Financial Institutions, Government, and Regulatory Reform Committees. Shackleford has worked as a policy and research specialist for the Indiana Healthcare Association, where she developed public policy. She is a graduate of Indiana University and IUPUI, having earned both her bachelor's and master's degrees in public affairs. So thank you again, Representative Shackleford, for joining us. And again, same question to you. Why did you decide to embark on a career in politics?
Thank you all. I'm sorry for trying to get in. I've been waiting, but got stuck somewhere, I guess, in another webinar. So I decided to go into politics. Basically, I wanted to see a change in my community. I grew up and was raised by a single mom who was working 2 jobs. A lot of times we were temporary on welfare, on food stamps. I attended public school. So I got to see some of those disparities in my community, whether it was in the education system, the healthcare system. So I knew I wanted to make some kind of difference and some kind of change in my community.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And then finally, Asheesh Agarwal, last but certainly not least. Asheesh is Deputy General Counsel at Tech Freedom, which is a nonprofit that advocates for free market principles in the technology sector. He has extensive experience in government, including senior roles in both the Trump and the Bush presidential administrations. That is George Bush 43, not 41. For instance, he served at the Federal Trade Commission and U.S. Department of Justice, where he served as a Deputy Assistant Attorney General in the Civil Rights Division. At DOJ, he successfully defended the constitutionality of the Voting Rights Act. Asheesh has been very active in South Asian and Asian American circles. He serves on the board of the Asian Pacific Bar Association of Indiana and on the advisory board of Indian Voices for Trump. He is a graduate of the University of Chicago Law School and has a BA from Northwestern University. He grew up in Kokomo, Indiana, just about an hour north of Indy, and lives in Zionsville with his wife and 2 children. Asheesh, welcome. And again, same question to you. Why did you decide to embark on a career in politics?
Well, first of all, Larry, thank you so much for moderating this panel. I have also been looking forward to it, and I think it's wonderful that InnoPower is doing this, particularly during these challenging times. For myself, the same as Cecilia, my parents immigrated to the United States from India, and it really was about giving back to the community. And there's so many different ways that people can do that through charitable organizations or what have you. But for me, the idea of getting involved in politics and public policy was a way that I thought could really have an impact on the community. Quite frankly, I also think it's a lot of fun. Everybody's idea of a great time might not be, walking precincts and stuffing envelopes, but you get to spend time with people who see the world the way that you do and have a lot of fun. And sometimes they give you snacks too. So I think it's a great time.
So politics is fun. I'm not sure the last time I heard that phrase, but I'll take your word for it. So the next questions that I ask, are open to anyone. Also, we may have questions from our audience members. As those come up, I will ask those as well. But this is a free and open forum. So anyone who wishes to answer, what particular challenges do you face as a person of color who is involved in politics?
I'll start off.
Robert?
I'll jump in. So being at the legislature, being an elected official, everybody knows politics runs on money and votes.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of time, African Americans are seen in secure districts, so it's more harder for us to raise money. there's a perceived notion that we have the inability to raise money because our districts are so safe. So it hinders us from getting in a lot of leadership positions, because if you're going to be seen as a leader, you got to be able to bring in the funds, not only to help yourself, but also to help other members. So I think that is one of the biggest challenges. We do have the ability to raise funds and I definitely have the ability to lead, but actually given those opportunities can be very challenging.
So wait a minute. This is kind of surprising to me. Money is important in politics. That would never have occurred to me personally. But obviously a great point. So the perception, as you said, that because African Americans in particular are often in safe districts, usually Democratic districts, there's not a lot of opportunity to demonstrate that you can raise money outside of that context. So understand that in particular, very well. Anyone else have an answer to that question?
Yeah, Larry, I'll actually very much agree with Robin's sentiment, and this is somebody who comes from the other political party and the other side of the aisle. But being a Republican, I have found it a challenge at times to get my party to focus on minority communities and to invest the resources to compete there. I think it's sad, but I think there is some truth to the idea that in minority communities, you have Republicans that tend to write them off as being people who aren't going to necessarily support them. And on the other side of the aisle, I suspect that, Robin can speak to this. You have this, perception that, the Democratic Party might be taking those voters for granted. And I think that's just, very bad for our community generally. I think it's healthy when both political parties and, smaller parties too are aggressively competing for those voters. So, I was happy to see, this past week at the RNC, the Republican National Committee at least make an effort to try to reach out to minority communities, and I hope that continues.
So I've a question for each of you, and just please answer briefly. And when I mean each of you, I mean Asheesh and Robin. So Asheesh, what can and should the Republican Party do to reach out more to people of color? And then Robin, if you could be thinking about your answer to the question of does the Democratic Party take voters of color, especially African Americans, for granted?
Well, I think 90% of life is just showing up. So I think, quite frankly, showing up at events, going into districts that aren't necessarily high Republican districts, just letting people know that you care about their issues and concerns, I think are great ways to show voters that you care. And quite frankly, that's what people want sometimes. I don't think that speaking as a Republican, you have to change your viewpoint on free market economics or things like that, but just explaining to people how those issues can work for them, listening to their concerns, I think can go a really long way.
No, Kia.
Nope. Go ahead, please, Robin. Well, does the Democratic Party, and we've heard this charge before, certainly, does the Democratic Party take the African American vote for granted?
So I think sometimes we do see the party taking African American Democrat Party taking advantage of the African American vote. A lot of times we will see candidates just coming to our churches, not even staying for the whole service, giving lip service, and just giving us empty promises. I think African Americans are now to the point where they're saying, okay, we don't care what party it is, whether it's Democrat or Republican, we want you to focus on our needs. We have too many neighborhoods that have been neglected. So we are constantly fighting within the Democrat Party to make sure that we're not taking advantage of African Americans, but you do constantly see it here and there, but it's a continuous fight to make sure that we're just not giving lip service and everyone is being taken care of.
Absolutely, and we know in the not too distant past, I mean, as recently as 50 or 60 years ago, the Republican Party certainly competed very well for the African American vote. In fact, of course, most African Americans were, in fact, Republicans until the rise of FDR, and especially after the legislation of the 60s, and then there was a shift. And so let me have a question. We want to get Cecilia and Rima involved as well. The question is, what most surprised you when you entered the arena of politics?
Well, I'll go ahead and start because we were talking about money, and I guess I was surprised that it takes money, and unfortunately, I think a lot of voters don't realize that they need to invest behind a candidate, right? Whether it's $5, $10, $1,000, right? It's like people don't realize that you have to raise money in order to get your message out, in order to buy signs and literature, the campaign literature that you distribute, things like that. So I think teaching and helping people understand that you need to support candidates by writing a paycheck, whatever you're able to give goes a long way. I think what was discouraging a little bit too was, as I was canvassing, going door to door, and realizing that not everybody's registered to vote. It's sad. You would go, you see the log of registered voters in a neighborhood, and you think, oh, I'm going to go to each door, and a neighborhood of 60 people, 60 houses, you would only go to maybe 20. So that realization. The other realization is, at least at the local level, is how little people know about who's representing them at the local level, who their mayor is, who's on the city council, what are the roles of the mayor and city council. I hope that in the future, and this is what I try to do, is to really get people to look at politics as local, and to really try to get involved locally, understand how that works, because so much is being done at a local level that doesn't reflect always nationally. And we have a lot of wonderful local leadership in different municipalities that are doing great things. But unfortunately, I think people just don't understand that how much local politics can impact your day to day.
Absolutely. I love that idea that all politics is local. There was a famous former Speaker of the House, the late Tip O'Neill, who is famous for creating that aphorism, all politics is local. And certainly back to the money chase, obviously an important issue for all politicians. Rima, what about you? What surprised you once you got into politics?
Well, I think that fact that Hoosier women we're about 52% of the state, yet we represent such a small minority within the Indiana state legislature. I mean, I think that that's a point to be noted. And then within the women that are there, certainly we're so lucky to have Representative Shackleford and others. But I would love to see a Muslim woman there, a woman from Asian American there. And so I think that the lack of representation and the lack of diversity, even when you think about intersectionality, just really surprised me, because I think representation is so important, and it's important to have a diverse group of voices at the table when making decisions.
Absolutely. Indiana, I'm a fifth generation Hoosier, and our state is certainly more diverse now than it ever has been. And it certainly would be a good thing to have very, very broad representation, certainly by gender and race and culture and so on. Here's a question for all of you. As you can hear, we have Democrats on the panel, we have Republicans on the panel. So here's a question: is bipartisanship something is it a relic of the past, or is there an opportunity, especially in a state like Indiana, where the Republican Party has supermajorities in both houses and also holds the governor's chair? Is bipartisanship a relic of the past?
I'll go if that's okay.
Sure, please.
I don't think so. I think that here, especially on a local level, bipartisanship is very well alive and thriving. I know that at Women for Change, we were following a number of bills here during the 2020 legislature, and of those, majority of the bills that we're advocating for were all bipartisan, and most of those were authored by women. And so again, back to the point, when women are in those seats, they work together, they work across the aisle to get things done. So I think the way to continue that bipartisan spirit is to elect more women into the positions.
Excellent. Anyone else want to tackle that? Yes, Robin, please.
I can follow up on that. So I don't think it's a thing of the past. Being in a super minority, you have to work with the other side. And there's a lot of legislators that you have common ground on. Whether it's rural issue or urban issue, you're able to work with a Republican legislature. This summer, we've been working on our justice reform. And so we've had small group gatherings actually get together. So I think everybody usually wants to see change. We usually get along in private and more behind the scenes than what you see in public. So in order to get a bill passed, in order to get any legislation within a Republican's bill, you're going to have to be bipartisan. And I think we do a pretty good job at it. There's always room for improvement, but there is good work going on both sides of the aisle.
I would agree.
Yeah, please, Asheesh.
I would agree with that sentiment from my perspective, having worked in Washington some. I mean, just in the past few months, I know the media tends to focus on the disagreements for understandable reasons, but we've had multiple bipartisan relief bills, stimulus bills passed, in response to COVID. I think that's a good thing. You've had bipartisan criminal justice reform. Some trade deals have been passed by Congress, where the concerns of both parties were incorporated into the final work products. So I think it can happen. Of course, I think that the tendency is to focus on the disputes, which colors the narrative. But in the meantime, I think a lot of good work is being done.
Excellent. Next question is, how has, and again, you all have been involved in politics at differing levels and over different time periods, but I'm curious, how has the political scene changed since you got involved in the political arena?
Well, I'll start. In Fishers, we now have 2 Democrat city council members. That's the first time that's happened. And so historically in Fishers and Hamilton County, we've had mostly Republican leadership, Republican elected officials. So that's changed, So I think, people are starting to hopefully get more involved in what they're passionate about, in their causes, in trying to better their community, to have a voice. So I see things changing in that regard.
Excellent. Well, as a proud resident of Fishers myself, I'm glad to hear that those changes are being made. We have to do something about 116th Street on the traffic, but we'll talk about that later. Anyone else? How has politics changed since you entered the fray?
Well, certainly the growth of social media. It's possible for candidates and elected officials to reach their voters directly, fully agreeing that money remains important, but somebody can get their voice out there via Facebook and other social media tools, and that's a good thing, but not without some downsides. I think there is a tendency for for the sort of echo chamber effect, where people are only getting news from sources that they already agree with, maybe not seeing other perspective. It can also be damaging on a personal level. I mean, I'm familiar with, I'm sure we all are, with people who've had their careers really derailed by social media posts that maybe 10 years ago was fine, but now is seen as very offensive. So it can be a challenge.
Yeah, one of my favorite pastimes is to complain about Facebook while I'm on Facebook. So I definitely can appreciate that. In fact, just the other day, I came across a book, maybe some of you have heard of it, the 10 ways in which social media ruins your life. And I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but it's fascinating. And the person who told me about it, I was teasing him. I said, yeah, I'll share that on Facebook as well, how social media is ruining our lives. Rima, what do you think? How's politics changed since you joined?
Well, I was also going to ask you, were you unable to read the book because you were spending time on Facebook? I'm just joking.
Absolutely.
I think that from my perspective, I've seen that there are a lot more people that are involved, come out to testify, come out to the State House, attend a meeting, write letters to their legislators that I had not seen in the past. And so that gives me a little bit of hope when we have people. I've talked about this before, but I've had volunteers of the organization text me and say, which building's the State House and which door do I get in? Which is great. We need more and more people to get involved and realize that the State House is your building. Absolutely. And that you deserve to be there.
Absolutely. I tease my kids that there's this ancient practice called writing, and so you're writing a letter to your representatives. I think is incredibly important. Let's shift gears a little bit and ask maybe a little bit more personal question. Think back to when you were a teenager. Okay, and if you could go back and talk to your teenage self, what advice would you give with regard to sort of life in general, but also in particular about entering politics?
I think if I was talking to my teenage self, the first thing that I would tell myself was, don't be a lawyer, go be a coder. Maybe tell myself about these ideas for things like Facebook and Amazon. But I think more seriously, I would, I think I would tell myself to get involved in politics for the right reasons, and the right reasons are to make a difference in the community. I think there are people who get involved, expecting something out of it, and if you do, sometimes that works out, but you're also setting yourself up for disappointment and frustration. So get involved for the right reasons, do it, and that's its own reward.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. The word politics, if you trace it all the way back to the Greek, comes from politikos, which means citizen, right? And so to get involved for the right reasons as a citizen is incredibly important. Cecilia, what would you tell your younger self?
Gosh, not to be scared. I guess sometimes people say, gosh, politics is scary for them, being a leader and being an elected official. But I have to say that, we need leaders. We need everybody to get engaged and to make a difference in one way or another, whether you are a voter, whether you are a volunteer, whether you write that check, whether you are elected official. We all need to work together to help solve our greatest challenges. And I think I would continue just to keep going, and follow your dream, follow your heart, make a difference in the world, use your passion and your God-given talents to leave this world a better place.
Excellent. Robin, I'm curious, I'm sure that when you were a teenager, you said you wanted to grow up to be a politician, right? No one ever does that, right? No one ever says, when you ask a sophomore in high school, what do you want to be? I want to be Speaker of the House, right? No one ever says that, right? So what would you tell your younger self?
So I would tell myself to go for it. If you definitely want to see a change and impact to the community, this is the way to go. I was more focused on business. I was totally business bound for IU, and just that was my whole focus. But I would say there's something more out there than profit. If you truly want to make a difference, then run for office where you can actually change laws and make laws. And like everyone else said, just do it. Just be courageous, because you are scared and timid, but this is something that needs to be done.
Absolutely. Let me ask this, shift gears a little bit, Rima, and ask you a question. What challenges or problems that we face cannot be solved by politics?
Well, I wish you asked me the first question earlier.
answer that one. That's fine. Either one.
Well, I'm going to answer that one because I think that as women, we doubt ourselves so many times. Am I qualified enough? Am I good enough? Do I have the skill set? Should someone else do it? Is there a man that holds that position and he's okay there? And I think I would really tell myself, and what I tell others, is that you are enough. And you are good enough, and the skill set that you have is enough, and it's important. And it's important for women to be in these positions. Studies show that when we run and we win, like Representative Shackleford, we do that to make a difference. Absolutely. We don't do that for name recognition or to see our name on a billboard or on a flyer. We do that so that we can get things done. And it's so important to have young women and women be given that opportunity, and for them to know that what they bring, what they have, and their skills and their personality, it is enough. I know, especially for girls that are of minorities and women of color, we even doubt ourselves even more. And so I think that's very important to relay that message to younger folks, to get them into the fringe. And I forgot the second question you were going to ask me because I was so passionate about the first.
Is there anything else? Is there anything that we cannot solve via politics?
I think that we've come to this place as a nation where we've become so divisive, that everything's become so polarized, that how we've lost the ability to speak truth to power, but in a way of civility. It's important to speak up and speak out, speak against injustices, but to do that in a civil way. And I think that we've forgotten how to do that. And so I'd really like for us to go back to that place. Would be, I don't know, it would mean that we are going back and making progress again.
Yeah, absolutely. If we could learn to talk to each other more. Although, if we look at some of these campaigns, even in the 1800s, they were pretty ugly as well. So there's something just fundamentally human, it seems to me, about our desire to sort of fight with each other. Asheesh, what do you think? Is there anything that we can't solve via politics?
Oh, I think I think politics is downstream from culture, from the economy, and from family, quite frankly. So I think politics has its place, but most of the problems all of our communities facing, quite frankly, I think they start in at home, in your family, in your communities, and that's the place to address them. I think politics is a great can do great things for our communities, for our country, but it's only a part of it. So as soon as I get off this call, I'm going to coach my son in his little league game. Quite frankly, I think that's probably the most impactful thing that I'm going to do today.
In what sport?
Baseball.
Baseball. Excellent. Well, good luck.
My daughter has soccer this afternoon, so that's all probably more important.
Excellent. Well, our time is short now. We have about 7 minutes. And so I'd like to ask each of you to answer the final question, which is, what are your hopes for the future and what are your fears for the future, whether it's here locally in Indiana or nationally or even internationally?
Can I go back and just follow up on what Asheesh said about the family?
Please.
Politics we can't do. Because I know this is a very controversial one, but the demise of the family structure, there's no way that we can legislate love. There's no way we can legislate how a parent should treat their child, or a father actually being a father, and a mother being a mother. And this has dramatically affected our kids and is the root cause of a lot of trauma that our kids are facing. So, and I know it could be a very touchy subject, but in politics, we can only do so much. We can make sure we're providing the services, the jobs, but we actually need people to actually start taking accountability and responsibility and see what they can do in that family structure.
Cannot agree more. There's the old phrase, the hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world. And so we certainly need to have parental involvement. There's nothing, in my opinion, there's no more important job than being a parent, a mother or a father. Absolutely. All right, so hopes and fears regarding the future.
I'll start. I have tremendous hope for the future, and Larry, is for a reason that you touched upon, which is that at one level there's nothing new under the sun, and I know it seems like our politics are more divided than ever, and maybe in one way that's true if you spend a little too much time on Twitter and Facebook, but at another level, this has been how it has been since the beginning of our country. In the early 1800s, presidential candidates literally accuse each other of being quitters. So by those metrics, things are pretty tame now. Whoever wins in November, the country will be just fine. We'll sometimes muddle through, sometimes do great things, but I think we're just fine.
Excellent.
And my hope is that out of all the protests, we actually see progress. We actually see significant change. My fear is that we will get into session and not see the change that we're looking for. So currently, that is my hope and fear right now, that I do want to see dramatic change come 2021 for everyone who's been out fighting and advocating.
Absolutely. Rima?
My hope is that this past month we commemorated the passage of the 19th Amendment, which gave some women the right to vote. Indiana, currently, we've never had a woman governor from the state of Indiana. We've never had a woman federal senator from the state of Indiana. So my hope is that we don't have to, that we fill those positions with women. My fear is that it might be another 100 years before we do that. And so I'm really hoping that that's not the case.
Absolutely. Gave a talk a few months ago on the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. And I do remind people that it was for white women to vote, not for African-American women. That wasn't guaranteed until 1965 with the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Very, very important point. Our experiment has lasted more than 200 years now. So but we're always striving to be a more perfect union. And so, the one office you didn't mention was a woman as president of the United States. And so hopefully that will not be too long in the future as well. Cecilia?
Well, my hope is that every generation leaves the next generation in a better place, that we make our communities, our country stronger, that we don't take our freedoms for granted, that more people vote, that more people step up to represent each individual culture, race. We're a big soup of different people, so we need representation. We need diversity of thought. We also need a civil debate and dialogue and exchange of ideas in a civil manner, but we can't take our freedoms for granted. So I hope that people will continue to step up, that they will vote. We need people to vote. That's, I think, a key thing that people take for granted. I hope we never get to a point where no one is voting, because it makes a difference. The people who represent us are supposed to be an extension of us. And so we need to look carefully of who we're choosing to make those decisions for us to solve problems. So it's really important. But I feel we have hope. We're United States of America, where we've overcome so many challenges, and we keep moving, and hopefully in a positive and better way for everybody.
Absolutely. And again, I think that's a great note to close on, emphasizing the importance of voting. In some countries, you're fined if you don't vote. And, sadly, in America, frequently the largest voting bloc is non-voters, right? And so we have to change that. And so hopefully the state legislature will look at some things, perhaps making voting a holiday, election day a holiday, certainly expanding polling places, just incredibly important to make it as convenient as possible for people to be able to vote. So thank each of you again. Rima, Asheesh, Robin, Cecilia, really, really appreciate your time. Thank you to our audience as well. Again, thank you to our sponsors. There is a survey that will pop up here at the end. We ask that you do complete that survey so we can improve for next time. But again, just as the moderator of this panel, I'm just this is even better than I knew it was going to go well. It's gone even better than I thought it was going to go. And I know you have a lot of things to do rest of your Saturday. Good luck, Asheesh, with your soccer and baseball games. And everyone have a rest. May the rest of your weekend be wonderful and restful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.